most marriages are made up of the yin and the yang, the analytical, the creative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right brain versus left brain. Like for me, definitely 100% creative. Doesn't mean that I don't have the analytical side. And I think vice versa for you, 100% analytical, yet you have all this other creative dynamic, right? So even just sitting here having this conversation, we're talking about, okay, for me, I'm just like, yo, woo, let's do it.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, let's slow down here, right? What's our plan? Let's put some structure around it. And you made a really good point. For those catching up with us, we're having this discussion on the yin and the yang in the marriage. You're here with the breezies again, just between us. Right? And you're right. If you wrap too much structure around it, you use the term authenticity, you lose some of the authenticity for certain things. He said that it's too scripted, and I get all that. I get all that, but at the same time, there has to be a level of structure.
I agree.
Yeah, there has to be a level of structure. Now, how do we find that balance, right? And I think it's pretty cool that you are one. You are one way. You are the more creative way, and I am. And thank you for the compliment. The analytical way, but it can be difficult sometimes, right? Because especially being an analytical person, I always think that if we do X, Y, and Z, then we should get a certain result. You, on the other hand.
It's so infuriating.
Yeah. Why?
Because as a creative person, or some people would call it free-spirited person, it's like constantly being tied down or held back. And the hard part about that is, while I totally agree there needs to be structure in our lives, in my life, in everybody's life, I also know that there's moments, especially in your walk, where there's just like God will begin, like for me personally, he'll be speaking to me about something and I'm just going and I am like blazing in that moment, or I'm creating in that moment, or speaking in that moment or whatever. And it's like, okay, no, now it's time. Okay, case in point, right? So we go to church and now we have our own church, but it's like, this is when worship is, this is the tithes, this is the word, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be structure. What I'm saying is that there also has to be a space for God to work and for those that he uses creatively to move, right? Because sometimes the worship leader, let's take worship, right? Dance, whatever. So the worship leader is moving and he is in line with what God is saying, and he's downloading music for him, right? Or her. And it's moving. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, it's 11:20 and we have to move on. Well, guess what? Maybe God, that whole service needed to be taken over in that moment because there needed to be travailing. There needed to be high praise, right? And that was going to feed the people. I think knowing and understanding that God moves the way he wants to move allows us to be free to receive him in his way and not just ours. Now, when it comes to marriage, right? If I'm over here and I'm like, woo, you come get me.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which is fine, and I respect that I'm able to say to you now, because I think it was easier earlier on in our marriage for you to rein me in than it was for me to rein you in. Because I believe that this is me watching my analytical husband, when analyticals are so structured that it's really hard to get them to be like, okay, maybe I can let this go, or maybe I don't have to do it exactly this way right now.
Yeah, and that's, I guess that was a part of our marriage that I struggled with, watching some of the ways in which you would operate sometimes. And to me, it just didn't make any sense. And I would ask myself, well, why would you do that? But why? Right?
I love how he said he would ask himself. You would also ask me.
I'd have to ask myself first. And I would ask myself, well, why would you do that? And then I would ask,
this makes no sense.
This makes no sense, right? And eventually I would have to take a step back and realize that my approach wasn't the only approach.
Amen. And that's amen to both of us.
Of course. Realizing that, structure is good and structure is needed, but sometimes having a little bit of what's that word that you like?
Creative freedom.
Creative freedom. That she likes to use, right? Having that creative freedom to do certain things allows for a different kind of growth.
Mm.
You know, I always thought the growth was linear, right? But it's not. You know, it's a little bit more abstract. So I applaud you for having me open up and stretching my creative wings.
Yes.
They're not that far stretched, but I'm working on them.
Well, I applaud you because as a free creative person, it is important for us to also have structure in our lives so that other things get done too.
Right.
And to make sure that we're not just going off the seat of our pants or, you know, spiritually just flying all the time, but that we're producing things and structuring things, you know, even within my business, like learning, understanding things from you, because, you know, I can move and dance and all that, but there's like the backside to the business that's important, which wasn't my strong suit whatsoever. And kind of watching how that's your strong suit and putting all those things together and not being intimidated by it. And so learning how to be the yin and the yang without being intimidated by the other person's strong suit.
You hit that. I was going there, but go ahead.
Right? And not being fearful of exposing your insecurities or just your struggles is really important. And I struggled with that for many, many years. Is you have the analytical brain. You were more analytical. I'm not going to say you had it, because I believe we all have a little bit of both.
Absolutely.
But the way you would operate, I would envy that. Like, I would envy that and be like, oh my gosh, I wish I was able to do this. I wish I was able to understand that. And I would be so insecure about my ability to understand certain things business-wise or you know, in that aspect. And so I would try to hide that side of me because I didn't want you to think less of me, because that was your strong suit. So I always wanted you to see me in your strong suit, strong. But I was weaker in your strong suit. And instead of allowing you to help me become stronger in it, I was trying to hide it until I got stronger and say, look, I'm like you. Like, I understand. I'm like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that plays into the marriage and saying, okay, now I can respect that you're stronger at things than I'm strong. And I'm stronger at things. And now I can not only respect it, I always respect it, but now I can appreciate it and say, no, I don't understand that. Or make you come back and reteach me and be like, I don't care, do the computer again. You know, and not be insecure. And so it's not just about you're this and I'm that. It's about how we can both grow together and how we can strengthen each other's weaknesses and build an amazing relationship.
You just made me think about something here, and it's not something that I really gave a lot of thought to before, but you actually, whatever you said there, just prick that nerve. So when you're talking about some of the insecurities you might have had when we were talking about in terms of business stuff, it made me think about listening and watching you pray, and I'd be like, wow, this woman really knows how to pray. She has the anointing of God. Her prayers are like little sermonettes, right?
I'm done.
And me, when I pray, I get right to the point. I say, Lord, I need help. Right? It sounds funny, but I say that in jest, but you'll notice it's I had to be intentional about understanding who I am in the way my brain works or the way that I operate.
Yeah.
And not just stay so focused on just the points I need to cover,
Yeah.
but allowing the creativity to seep in there, maybe using those points as an outline.
Yeah.
But not only as the line.
Yeah.
And I applaud you for that, because I remember something you said to me about a year and a half ago when I really started to preach and to preach in a different manner. And guys, listen to your wives. It's just between us. When they give you advice, you might want to take it. I was giving a sermon, and you said to me after, when I asked you, well, how did I do? And you said, well, yeah, you did great. You covered all of your points. You got all of your scriptures, and yeah, it was well delivered. And I know that was code. That was code for
definitely code. But it was more than a year and a half ago. You've done amazing.
Okay.
But yeah, it was cold.
It was code for, that was a great, well-delivered, well-articulated argument.
Mm-hmm.
But it could have used some of your creativity to be delivered as a sermon. And I was like, wow. And that stuck with me because what it did was, it allowed me to change my approach completely.
Mm-hmm.
Right? To say, okay, you can add some structure here, but then allow for some room for that creativity. Welcome the creativity. Don't stifle it.
Yeah.
Right? Welcome the creativity. And I applaud you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I think it's so important to respect the differences that you have so that you can grow. Because if you had the same exact strengths, you're really not growing. You're really not stretching.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I listen to you preach now, and you are definitely a different preacher, pastor than you were before. Same level of love for God, same level of respect for God, same level of humility and desire to serve God. But your flow is totally different, and it's just fluid, and I'm like, yeah. And I like when I watch you continually move, I'm like, yeah, he's going, because I can feel you just flowing. You've done all the studying you needed to do. You make sure that your points are together and all that. But then you allow yourself to just move however the Lord chooses to move you. And I think that vice versa, I've done the same thing. I've listened to how you make sure that you have this and this and this intact. And I'm like, okay, Therese, you can move, but make sure you don't forget don't just go flying off the seat of your pants. There are some other things that you have to make sure that you, remember to put in there. And that's so key. I mean, we're talking about our ministries and stuff like that, but in life, it's so important for couples to respect each other's differences, to learn from them, to ask each other questions on how to grow from them.
Hold on, those sound like calls to action. Respect. Yeah.
Learn.
To learn.
Grow.
Definitely grow.
Ask questions.
Ask a lot of questions.
Like, why shouldn't I be able to expose? I mean, here's the thing. We live in a world where everybody won't be naked with somebody, right? But that's not exposure to the level of marriage is supposed to be exposure. Intimacy is different than just being naked, right? Because you got nudist beach, but they don't know nothing about each other. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so marriages, you have to get to the point where, you know what? If you are the person that is pulling ahead forward in whatever thing, that you don't look down on the other person or try to drag them through. You go back and say, hey, this
meet them where they're at.
Meet them where they're at. And this is so funny because Nellie told me this was going to come up. And I'm totally going to teach about this another time. But the other night when we were coming home from the beach, it was completely dark out because we did the food and everything. And so you come up and you're driving the sports car, and yet I'm not trying to go, any faster than I'm going. I won't say how fast I was going. But you come up behind me and you stay behind me the whole time. And so you would let me drive ahead, and then you would zoom up because you were, you were out with the top down. You want to be flying. And I'm like, okay, I get that. And so you kept doing it until we got to an area where we were like close to home. Like we were like an exit away from home.
Yep.
So I don't know if you paid attention to this, but I'm like, because I kept telling you to go because I knew you wanted to go fast. And I was like, I'm okay. And you would not let me stay back there. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, fine. But when we got to the other place, you went to take off, but then you took the lead, but then you would slow up still. So what I did is I came up behind you, and I would get close to you on purpose because I knew you wanted to go faster. And so that you would take off and go faster. And so it went from you covering my back and covering me to me pushing you to go the distance you want. And that's how you have to be in a marriage. You have to be able to say, okay, right now I'm going to cover your back because I see that you're falling back and you just need to be covered right now.
Yes.
And then if you do that with your mate, when it comes time and your mate is solid and they feel confident, they're able to be like, yo, go. Even if I'm behind you right now, I'm still running.
Yep.
And we were in a place where that wasn't so when we were younger. Mm-hmm. You'd be like, let's go. And I'm like, ah. But that night was just a representation of where we are now, in the point of, you stayed behind and made sure that I was okay. You know, and then when it came time to it, I'm like, no. And Jenna's sitting in the car and she's like, oh my gosh, you guys are so cute. This is so funny. I was like, yeah, because I know he's ready to like push on, but he's still trying to make sure I'm okay.
Absolutely.
And so I'm like, no, go baby, you can go. We're good. I'm almost home. I know where I am.
Absolutely.
Take off. And so I said all that to say the fact that whether it's right brain, left brain, yin and yang, analytical versus creative, respecting each other's differences, strengthening one another, not being insecure about it, and
Just
asking
listening
questions
and listening.
Oh my goodness, that's a whole different episode on listening.
Well, you guys have been great. Stay up for our next episode of Just Between Us.
Just between us. Now, don't forget, if you have questions about this particular subject, Friday by 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ask your question and we'll be sure to answer it the following Wednesday during Just Between Us.
And make sure you put in hashtag yin and yang on our page.
Yeah. And if you don't want your name mentioned, that's quite all right. Just put anonymous next to it and we won't mention your name, but we will answer your question.
We won't mention it publicly. Just between us, guys.